With the NFL season coming to an end, we're going to see a lot of changes this offseason in the coaching staff. And we've already seen Brian Dable and Brian Callahan already get fired by their respective teams. And I don't know how many teams are going to fire their coaches. I think there's a lot of them that are still up in the air, but I think there's a couple guaranteed ones. And one of the ones I think is a guarantee is Jonathan Gannon with the Arizona Cardinals. Jonathan Gannon was a hire I actually liked initially from a couple years ago when he was the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it looked like the Cardinals were on the right path a few years ago. I mean, they played really competitive against a lot of teams, and they improved from year one to year two. But after year two, there was some writing on the wall that this may not be working for the Cardinals. The Cardinals had a real chance to make the playoffs last year and just completely fell apart. And this season has been kind of the same as last season. They've had a lot of inconsistencies. They'll start off very slow in games like against Seattle, but then finish strong, but just don't have enough juice left to finish the game. They also had a bad kicking mishap in that game. And also a lot of blunders against the Tennessee Titans, a game which they had a lead in, but then blew it. And they also were competitive against teams like the Colts and Packers, but their defense couldn't hold on late and ended up blowing leads in both of those games in the fourth quarter. Not to mention the sideline incident that happened earlier with DeMarcado when he hit him and got fined for $100,000. That was also not very good, and that's going to change what the locker room thinks of you as well. And another guy I think is probably going to get fired is Pete Carroll. A hiring that many people liked coming into this season. People thought Pete Carroll can change the culture with the Raiders and turn them into a better program. He brought over Geno Smith, a guy he had success with in his last couple of years with Seattle. But the Geno Smith decision has not been a good one. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. And the offensive coordinator he brought in, Chip Kelly, to make him the highest paid offensive coordinator, has been a disaster too. He recently just got fired. And they just have not utilized their players well. They drafted Ashton Jeanty 6th overall, and he's not getting enough touches for a number one running back or a guy you would draft in the first round. Pete Carroll, who's supposed to be a defensive guy, their defense has been one of the worst in the league. And outside of Brock Bowers and Max Crosby, this has not been a very good team and not a lot of standouts besides those two guys. And for Pete Carroll, I think this is time for him to retire anyway. He's 74. At some point, the game of football moves away from you as you get older, and it just seems like the game has moved on from Pete Carroll. And we saw moments in Seattle where that was already happening. And with the way this team's, and not to mention the AFC West is really competitive, and the Chiefs should be better next year after Patrick Mahomes comes back. And I don't think the Raiders are going to have much success with Pete Carroll leading this team. They're probably going to need a new and younger voice in the locker room. Besides those two coaches, I'm not entirely sure if there's any other coach that's a guaranteed that get fired. I think there's a few guys that could potentially get fired, such as John Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are currently 7-7. They technically still are in it for the division, but the Steelers have the tiebreaker currently right now for the Ravens. And the Ravens have also dealt with a lot of injuries this year, but there's still been some key issues with the Ravens. They're still underperforming against bad teams. They play them really close or they lose to bad teams still, and that's been an issue for the past couple years. Not to mention, they're still blowing late leads in games like against Buffalo from this season, and that's just been an issue for years now. The defense has improved from earlier on. Their scoring defense has moved up to 15th, and they're top 10 in red zone defense, and they're top 10 in third down defense. But I think maybe just a new voice in the locker room would be good for the Ravens. It just seems like this team always has like bad moments in the playoffs, whether they're underperforming or they always just come up short. And I don't think they would move off Lamar Jackson. I think they would move off Harbaugh before Jackson. And before I continue, no, the Steelers will not fire Mike Tomlin. They should fire Mike Tomlin. They probably should have fired Mike Tomlin 7 years ago. But this is an organization that does not like making any changes, especially at the head coaching spot. And Zach Taylor is another guy that should get fired. Probably should have got fired a few years ago. But we know this is a Bengals organization that does not like making any changes. They're very cheap, and they don't want to fire coaches before their contract expires. This is a franchise that kept Marvin Harrison for way too long after having like zero success in the playoffs. And I think that Super Bowl appearance that Zach Taylor got in with the Bengals is going to keep his job for another 3 to 4 years at least. Even if we all know he's a coach that is just getting bailed out by high-end talent from Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and that he can't really do anything schematically well once Joe Burrow's down. And even when Joe Burrow's playing, like this is just not a guy that is fit to be an NFL head coach or really a play caller. Along with Zach Taylor, Kevin Stefanski fits in that same category. He should be a guy that gets fired, but knowing the Browns, I'm not sure what they're going to do. He has led them to 2 playoff seasons and won Coach of the Year twice and had a really great 2023 season coaching 3 different quarterbacks and making the playoffs with Joe Flacco. But besides that, they have been a bottom-tier offense for a lot of these seasons, and they've had a losing record in all of his seasons except for those two. And this season has been another disaster. He started Dylan Gabriel for way too long and committing to him. His relationship with Shedeur is a little shaky, and Shedeur hasn't been much better than Gabriel, but he should have started him a little earlier. I don't know why he was so committed to Dylan Gabriel, and really there hasn't been much development in this offense, and his play calling isn't really that good either, and schematically he hasn't been anything noteworthy. But again, this is the Browns. You never know what the Browns are going to do. This is one of the most dysfunctional franchises in the NFL. I could see them keeping Kevin Stefanski because he's been their most successful head coach probably since the 80s. Lastly, I want to talk about Mike McDaniel. This was a guy earlier in the season I thought would be guaranteed fired, but the team is 5-2 ever since their 1-6 start, and have looked a lot more competitive. Their defense has improved tremendously, and they've been one of the more physical defenses in the league. Not to mention their run game with Etienne has been really good, and they've developed a great offensive identity starting with the run game. Tua still has not been very good this season. He's been very turnover heavy, and he has not been good like he has been in years past. And this is still a team that does struggle in the cold. But I think Mike McDaniel's turnaround has been very impressive with this team, especially after the firing of Chris Grier. That felt like that was the writing on the wall for Mike McDaniel. But from what I've read, too, their team seems to really like Mike McDaniel, and the players are really standing by him. So I can honestly see Mike McDaniel having another year or two with Miami after this turnaround of a season, and what the players have been saying, too. Maybe they move off of Tua before Mike McDaniel. But that's about it. Let me know if there's any coaches I didn't mention in this video. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe for more football content. Peace.